The Chicago Bears are the story of the NFL draft. They have the first pick, they have the 9th pick, and they have Justin Fields.
Yeah.
What the Bears do in this NFL draft determines what everybody else does in the NFL draft, and that's why we want to bring in our friend Jim Miller, Bears analyst. You can hear him every day on SiriusXM NFL Radio, on X at @JimMiller_NFL, former quarterback of the Chicago Bears, former quarterback of the Michigan State Spartans as well. Hey, Jim, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you.
Hey, Jim.
Good to be with you. And I'm sure if you knew what the Bears were going to do, a lot of people would want to know what that is too. What are the Bears going to do? This seems like a really difficult decision. I mean, there's 3 or 4 different ways you could go with this thing. What would you, if Ryan Poles called Jim Miller and asked for your advice? What would you do? What would you say?
I think they can do them both. You know what Pat Kerwin and I have talked about on SiriusXM NFL Radio. Certainly, everybody realizes Justin Fields has a ton of talent. You know, I think he can make dropping plays, but I think we understand it's got to be more consistent at the quarterback spot as well, play in and play out. You know, teams over the years have held on to their first-round quarterback and yet drafted another first-round pick. You know, you look at Kansas City, where Ryan Poles came from. They had Alex Smith, who's a number 1 overall selection by the 49ers. And what they do, they traded up from 28 to 10 to draft Patrick Mahomes. And so even look at the Chargers back in the day. They had Drew Brees, and they worked a trade. Well, granted, they drafted Eli Manning, but they ended up trading him to the Giants for Phillip Rivers, who was a first-round pick. They basically just swapped picks. And Drew Brees played so well that they then placed a franchise tag on him. And it wasn't until the following year when Drew hurt his shoulder that they inserted Phillip Rivers into the mix. So that could be in play, too, for Chicago. They could keep Fields, still draft a quarterback, let him develop, and if Justin Fields plays so well, then I think that's a good problem to have, that you could place the franchise tag on him. But I don't think the Bears will put the 5th-year option on it. It sounds like, they're open to all scenarios right now, because in Chicago it's kind of like a civil war. Either you keep Justin and trade down, or you trade Justin and obviously draft a quarterback. But, my scenario is you can do both, because you could have 2 horses in the Kentucky Derby, not one.
That would definitely be an interesting way to go about it. Let me ask you about Caleb Williams and your evaluation of him as a player. And I guess the question I want to ask as well is, and I know this shouldn't be any part of a general manager's evaluation at all, but because a previous regime passed on Patrick Mahomes, would that in any way determine whether you take a shot on a guy like Caleb Williams, who has been compared to Patrick Mahomes? Should that play any role whatsoever in what the decision is here with the Bears at 1?
Well, I think it even goes back to last year. They just passed up on C.J. Stroud, who was the offensive rookie of the year. With a first-year head coach and a first-year play caller, and he was the NFL rookie offensive player of the year. Certainly everybody understands that was to get a further evaluation on Justin Fields, but I would think you can't pass up another quarterback again. A lot of people like his skill set. I think Jaden Daniels from LSU is an interesting guy. I personally think when it's all said and done, he will leapfrog Drake May from North Carolina. Just seems like he has a lot of buzz that's really nobody's talking about in the media for the LSU star. But Caleb Williams is an interesting guy. But like anything, you got to make sure that the person, fits in the building. He's going to blend into your culture and what you're trying to build. I think all those things matter, and that's what this contest is about right now, is you have to evaluate the person as well, who's going to be in that building and who is the best fit overall. But, yeah, it does look like it would be a quarterback. Whether it's one of those 3, will be the time will tell.
Jim Brennan was here. Good to have you on the show. I love the Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes comparison, but the difference was Alex Smith was going into year 13 when they drafted Patrick Mahomes, so they kind of brought him in as a guide him into being the next guy, which Patrick turned into literally the last game of his first year, and then Alex gets shipped off to the Commanders, the Redskins at the time. If you're not going to go with Caleb Williams at 1, but you still want to draft a quarterback, wouldn't it make sense for the Chicago Bears to work that pick into somebody that definitely wanted Caleb Williams, so maybe just move back so then you still could draft a Jaden Daniels, still draft a Drake May, and still have Justin Fields and keep the competition open and still also have that 9th pick? Because I like what you said. You get 2 horses in the race, but you got to get rid of that first pick so that you can still get a top pick and get some draft capital behind it.
Yeah, I think all those options are on the table, and it's interesting because Cliff Kingsbury, obviously, who coached Caleb Williams out there at USC, he's now the Washington Commanders offensive coordinator, and certainly, could they be a team where the Bears just trade down a spot and, they're able to do what you're suggesting? And I do think all those things pretty much get discussed right here at the Combine. If you go back to last year, at that point, Scott Fitterer was the general manager of the Carolina Panthers, and that's when he opened up a discussion with Ryan Poles to try and make the deal work from 9-1. But typically, all those discussions start here in Indianapolis, and they're ongoing discussions all the way up till probably, I'd say, a week and a half before the draft when they solidify a deal. And I think all those things are happening right now behind closed doors.
Hey, Jim, last question for me is last year you guys made a move that made you so much better on defense and made you an actual better team, and that was picking up Montez Sweat. Maz will probably get into that too because that's what he keeps talking about. He definitely wanted us to make a move like that last year, whether it was Montez Sweat or whether it was Chase Young, and the Detroit Lions did not. Talk about what he meant to that team in terms of changing the intensity of the defense and changing kind of the identity. Much better team at the end, and I think the Detroit Lions saw that firsthand.
Yeah, I think he was kind of the last piece they needed to put together defensively, and he wanted to be a Chicago Bear, and he has raved about the culture that Matt Eberflus is really brought upon the team in the locker room. And I think the pass rush instantly got better. I think he freed up linebackers like T.J. Edwards, who I thought really had an all-pro year, along with Edwards, who were great free agent signings, and it helped out the back end of that secondary that everybody knows is young. Jaquan Brisker is he's only going on his 3rd year as a safety. Jalen Johnson's really coming into his own as a corner, starting to get great interceptions. And then Tyreek Stevenson, nobody's talking about him. He finished in the league a top 10 corner in the league. And then you look at a draft pick last year, when you look at Gordon at the nickelback spot, I think all those players benefited on the back end of the Bears defense with one player alone, and that was Montez Sweat. And the front four started to play a lot better as well as he commanded a lot of double teams.
Hey, Jim, it's Maz. Thanks for coming on with us, my friend. Listen, man, we're all general managers. We all know best. But what am I missing with Justin Fields? To me, he looks like a franchise quarterback. Why not keep him? Move down to number 2. Washington wants Caleb Williams. Why not take that pick and draft Marvin Harrison and get some extra picks down the line there? Maybe a number 1 next year again. Maybe a number 2 this year. The Bears want to fill up the positions. But can you imagine Justin Fields, Marvin Harrison, DJ Moore, and you add a running back? I don't know. Let's just throw Derrick Henry's name out there, for instance. Don't you think that makes your team playoff ready this year?
I think it's a possibility, but if you finish 7-10 again like you did this past year, you're fired as a GM. Let's be honest. Ryan Poles would be fired if they're 7-10 this year. The numbers have to be better from Justin Fields. If you go look at the turnovers, he is sacked 1 out of every 8 dropbacks passes. 1 every 8. The fourth quarter numbers are the worst in the National Football League. That position has to be better. Justin has to be better. Now, whether that happens this year, that's up for the Bears to decide. Because I think, again, if you draft a quarterback, you need to have one developing if it doesn't work out with Justin. Now, like I said, if he balls out, then you just place the franchise tag on Justin, is all you would do. But that position alone has to be better production-wise, and it has to be more consistent. Now, whether Justin can get there, That's up to him. Those things have to be corrected with those numbers that I just put out there. Because if you can't do that, you're probably a 7-10 team again, and they're all getting fired.
All right, you watch all the Bear games. So I'm going to ask you flat out, is Justin Fields a franchise quarterback?
I think he can get there. I personally do. I think he's well respected in the locker room. I think he works hard. I think it's important to him. I think he's tough. I think he's got all the intangibles to succeed. Now the consistency needs to be better. It has to be better from that standpoint. Otherwise, they'll be moving on from the quarterback position. That's typically how it works.
Talking to Jim Miller. Jim, I wanted to ask you, get back to Caleb Williams. Dan Campbell spoke at the Combine today, and one of the things he talked about is, we got the hours of tape. We see the tape. We see the workouts. It's fine. But the interview process is everything to us here at the Combine. For Caleb Williams, in maybe, I don't know if it's him or his camp that says he doesn't want to go to Chicago, what impact do you think that has on the Bears or anybody else that an NFL team would take? We're here in Detroit. Dan Campbell speaks so much about, are you a locker room guy? Are you a locker room guy? Are you a locker room guy? What kind of teammate are you? What kind of teammate are you? Do you want to be here? Do you want to be a Detroit Lion? For Williams, it doesn't sound like he wants to be a Chicago Bear. Would you say that's accurate? And what do the Bears do in that case?
Well, I don't think you've heard that from him.
Right.
You may hear it from some in his camp, like you said. And I think that does play an important part of it. Again, Eli Manning, when he was drafted first round by the Chargers, they made it perfectly clear. Even his father made it perfectly clear that he was not going to sign with the Chargers. Thus, it facilitated the trade to get Phillip Rivers. So, I think signability is always a big deal. Even now in this modern-day draft where everything's slotted and slated, what a player is going to make. But if he doesn't want to be there, I think it makes it difficult in order to have signability of a player. And that is something that the Bears will have to discuss as well.
Last one for you, Jim, and we appreciate your time. Know you're busy at the Combine. The last first-round quarterback taken from the University of Michigan was Jim Harbaugh in 1987. Is J.J. McCarthy going to break that streak this year? And what is your analysis of J.J. McCarthy?
Yeah, I think, again, in terms of, the measurables, I think he's a tough, smart leader. That can lead his team, and I think he showed that. I think for him, I don't think he's got probably the most arm talent of quarterbacks in this league, but, when you look at a guy like Brock Purdy, neither does he, and he can lead a team. So, I personally think that the way he's being talked about right now, that J.J. McCarthy probably has a really good shot of going in the first round, and I would say it's in the top 24 where he would be selected for him. So, I think he's thought of highly, and you hear nothing but good things about him for all the reasons that I just mentioned.
Jim, last question about your Chicago Bears. Will we see a new stadium, or will they forever just be at Soldier Field and be meant to move?
No, I think you're going to see a new stadium. I think they're pushing towards efforts to get that done. They'd like it to be in Arlington Heights, obviously, where they've already purchased that property, and they want it to be an all-encompassing stadium where you can, you have a retractable roof where you can host Final Fours, Big Ten championship games, because really all that revenue is going right here to Indy at Lucas Oil Stadium. So I think the Bears realized they were pretty short-sighted with the last stadium deal when you look at Soldier Field as it currently sits in Chicago. They want it to be an all-encompassing venue that really will be utilized on a year-round basis.
Check them out on NFL Radio, Sirius XM, Moving the Chains. Pat Kerwin and Jim Miller. Check them out. We really appreciate your time, Jim. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, guys. Good to be with you. Thanks.
Appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. Now, hopefully you go to St. Elmo's and get a shrimp cocktail.
There you go.
Right? Got it.
We'll do, man.
When you're in Indy, there's only one place to go.
There's only one way to go.
There's only one way to go.
Got to make the reservation 3 weeks in advance.
I don't think Jim Miller needs a reservation.
No, not Jim. Not Jim.
That's you and me.
This is true. This is true. I got no stroke in Indiana.